Hello everybody, we have finally let the smoke settle a little bit and let the Toronto Argonauts fans have their moment, but we are going to be doing our Grey Cup recap where we talk about the game between the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and the Toronto Argonauts and just hash it out. Now, before we start, please make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new to the CFL, if you're new to the channel in general, whatever the case may be. I'm just going to be recapping the game and I do stuff like this all the time. Anyway, let's get started. So, going into this game, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers were the heavy favorites to win this for obvious reasons. They had won the past two titles. They were 15-3, franchise best season at the time, going up against a Toronto Argonauts squad that really hadn't shown a whole lot. Yes, they won 11-7, had the best record in the East, but hadn't been able to hang out there with some of the better teams in the league like Winnipeg, Calgary, BC, you know what I'm saying? And so going into this one, this looked like it was probably going to be the coronation of the Blue Bombers dynasty, nonetheless at Mosaic Stadium where the Saskatchewan Roughriders, their arch rivals, play. But Toronto had other plans. So in this one, they were able to get the lead early on, but things really seemed like just odd, very odd. You know, in the first half, it wasn't a high-scoring game. And for me, I was thinking going into the half, Toronto lost this game already. Why? Because they abandoned the run. Things weren't going particularly well. Yes, they might have moved the ball at times, but in general, it just was not looking too good for them. Jackson Jeffcoat had some moments as well in this one, and I thought, you know, this is going to be done. Winnipeg's going to turn it on in the second half, and they kind of did, but we're going to talk about really what ended up winning Toronto this game towards the end. Second half comes, and it just seems like Winnipeg's got it. They eventually get that Grant punt return touchdown, which is a Grey Cup record, by the way. And then they take that 23-14 lead. That's their 9-point lead. I believe that was the biggest lead in this game at any point. And this is kind of where all the craziness happened. You saw at times where Winnipeg tried to get a little bit cute and try to run some trick plays that didn't work. And then you saw where the Blue Bombers really couldn't run the ball the way they wanted to. Yes, you look at the final stat line and you say, well, Brady Oliveira had over 80 rushing yards. What do you mean by that? What I mean is by really most of the time, I'd say that outside of a big run or two, for the most part, he was contained at or around the line of scrimmage. And you could see that Toronto somehow, some way was able to stay in it. I think a big part of this was the fact that Corey Mace, I'm not going to say this defense is perfect by any means because I do think this is a defense that can get torched on a weekly basis. But I will say this, they get big plays, whether that be sacks, they apply pressure, or they get interceptions. And in this game, I really did think that Toronto was going to lose because they had multiple interceptions that they could have had, but they didn't. They had bad penalties, both sides of the ball. Some of those were questionable, I will say. And then, of course, that they were just not in a spot where I felt like they could really get that momentum to switch in their direction. But we saw a Brandon Banks penalty that looked like it would be the final nail in the coffin for the Argos playoff hopes, changed by Chad Kelly, who came in because franchise quarterback McLeod Bethel Thompson ended up having a dislocated thumb, fractured thumb, I can't remember what it was, but anyway, he basically couldn't throw for the most part. I would imagine if he went out of the Grey Cup game, he couldn't throw. Chad Kelly had a 20-yard run on a 2nd and 15. If he does not pick that up, they lose the Grey Cup right then and there. I'm just going to say it. They end up getting a rushing touchdown to take a 24-23 lead. After that, that is when all this mayhem ensues. Winnipeg trying to get some points on the board as well. They just kind of have some mix-ups. And in general, this one was crazy. You had the Hellert field goal block. You had the Robbie Smith field goal block. And all around, this game was everything you could hope it would be, considering that going into halftime, it was pretty boring. I don't want to say that is a bad thing as a CFL fan and CFL supporter and CFL promoter. At the half, this game was not anything to say, oh, this is a classic, but the final quarter really did put things into perspective where you had multiple field goal blocks. You had a tackle or a sack by Robbie Smith that looked like it would be the end of the Blue Bombers' hopes of a dynasty, but a face mask kept them alive. In general, all around, like I said earlier, I think that this really could have been a game that Winnipeg blew Toronto out of. But again, I'd say that Toronto could have blown out Winnipeg because of the fact that they had so many dropped interceptions, they had those bad penalties, and that was the thing that I thought I was going to be doing a video about, the Blue Bombers being able to extend drives on 3rd down and get some scores off of that, or to be able to extend drives off penalties and score off that. But at the end of the day, despite Toronto not playing particularly well, that was the thing that shocked me. You always talk about going up against great teams, you have to play perfect to win, which I said that. they played pretty bad, and they still came out victors here. Why? Well, I mean, I think for them, they were just able to get that pressure on Collaros. Collaros did not seem comfortable. Most of the night, he ended up having under 200 yards. He had a lot of throws that I don't think were necessarily his fault. Receivers had to execute, and they didn't. But I also will say, in general, the offensive line looked like they were under a lot of pressure, and they weren't getting the ball out in time. Congratulations again to Toronto. I know this isn't a traditional recap, but there is just so much happening that when you go back and you look at all this stuff, you try to figure out what's important. A lot of it was the field goal block especially was important. And I know a lot of people are going to dog on Legio. At the end of the day, you go back and you look at the film for this Winnipeg team, and you would say that all around, they didn't really play necessarily well for the most part. The offense especially failed to execute, and Toronto, of course, took advantage of those mistakes. Chad Kelly, congratulations. Andrew Harris, you have a three-peat. Brandon Banks, I should say, he has his first Grey Cup, if I'm not mistaken. He is now 1-4 Grey Cup games. Jagera Davis, of course, has another championship. Continuing on, he knocked him one, but that was incredible for him. Glad to see that happen there for that guy. What an incredible player, what an incredible person. And Toronto gets their first championship since 2017. Big boost, hoping that attendance will be better for them going into next season as it improved from last year. And then Ryan Dinwiddie able to get his first championship as head coach. The Blue Bombers have some guys that could be leaving, but in general, this squad looks to be another title favorite next year. I'm excited to see how this goes, but what were your thoughts on this year's Grey Cup, and do you feel like this was a top 5 game for you? I know younger fans might be able to say so. Older fans, you have, of course, like the 1989 Grey Cup, which is an insanely good game. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down below. Leave them down below in the comments. Make sure to like this video and subscribe, everybody. Stay safe. Have a great night. Also, I will be continuing on in the off season. Forgot to say that.